Okay, I'd like to call to order the Amberley Village Council meeting of December 14, 2020. Please call the roll.
Tom Muthing,
Here.
Richard Bardak,
Here.
Peg Conway,
Here.
Ed Hattenbach,
Here.
Alita Kamine,
Here.
Ray Warren,
Here.
Natalie Wolf,
Here.
Scott Larmer,
Here.
Chief Wallace,
Here.
Andy Kakey,
Here.
Rick Kay.
Here. And if everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and again, we'll stay seated for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, welcome everyone to the council meeting. We obviously are again fully online, which is a prudent action given the level of spread in our community. We have a long agenda this evening, and so what I would like to do is whoever is presenting, allow the presenter to get completely through their presentation, and to the extent, please try to use the raise hand, and I'll recognize people if they have questions as we go through things. First item on the agenda is our minutes, and first our regularly scheduled.
The Wi-Fi is bad.
What was that? Okay, our first regularly scheduled meeting of November 9, 2020. There were a couple revisions to those minutes that were circulated earlier today. Are there any further changes to those minutes? If not, we can consider those minutes approved. Next is our minutes from our special council meeting of November 16, 2020. And again, there was one revision that was circulated earlier today. Are there any further revisions to those minutes? Seeing none, we can consider those minutes approved. And finally, we have the minutes from our work session of November 30, 2020. There were no changes to those minutes. Are there any changes? Seeing none, we can consider those minutes approved. Next item on the agenda is our finance report for October 2020.
This is Scott Larmer, Village Manager. I'd like to talk about October financials. The Finance Committee has met and has reviewed these. I want to share some of that information with you. You have the UAN report, but there's also a memo that has been included in your packet that briefly touches on some of these items. The earnings tax for the village up through the end of October 2020 totaled $2.6 million. So we collected $237,000 in the month of October. So far we have obtained 86% of our estimate that was prepared for us for this year. We had estimated we would take in $3 million. So at this point we're at 2.6, or 86% of the way there. So we still have 2 more months worth of earnings tax to collect. Realistically, we expect to take in about 2.9. So we expect to fall slightly short of the $3 million number. In regards to property tax, the village did receive payment in the amount of $78,200. This would be for what we refer to as the rollback that actually comes through the state of Ohio. The village also did receive money from the local government fund, the amount of $5,600. And so that brings our total revenue to date, the total revenue for the month of October was $625,000. And that brings us up to $5.1 million as of the end of October. So we're at a 92% collection rate in terms of overall general fund revenues. On the expense side, the village had expenses of a little over $200,000 in the month of October. So far, we have spent $4.3 million out of the general funds. We've spent 77% of the budget. Contrasting that to a calendar month, you'd be normally about 83% right now. So we ended the month with a $6.2 million general fund unencumbered balance. So, and that completes my report.
Okay, thank you. I do not see any raised hand. Are there any questions? If not, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is citizens to address the council. This evening, Bruce Lazarus is with us. Mr. Lazarus, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me and see me?
I can see you and we
Yes,
can hear
no?
you. So
Okay.
you
I
can go
will-
ahead.
I live at 3140 North White Tree Circle. I've been a Amberley resident for the past 22 years. This is not the first time I've spoken to council about this issue, and I'm afraid this won't be the last time either. While we've had a serious deer problem for some time, we now have a problem with coyotes. These two things are related. The coyote problem has increased in the last 3 years. About 2 years ago, an Apple Ridge resident whom I know's dog was killed by coyotes. Since then, whenever we let our dog outside at certain times of the day, we go outside with her. In the past, we could just open the door and let her go. The advantages of having an invisible fence. 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I was working in the yard, I found a bloody lower leg of a deer. It was the part from the knee down. I called the police because I wasn't sure of the protocol for disposal. Plus, when you find body parts from a large animal, you call the police. I was told I could just put it in the trash, which I did. Fortunately, I'm not squeamish about those things. I was told it was probably dropped by a coyote as they were running through the yard. I found that very unsettling. A few days later, my dog found another but much smaller piece of deer at the other end of the yard. Amberley is becoming dangerous with coyotes running around. I'm not a coyote expert, but there is a correlation between coyotes and our outrageous deer population. There are probably other factors that come into play to account for the coyotes, but we have to identify deer as a major factor. I've gone to almost every deer calling meeting. We need to do more, not only because it's good for the environment and good for the deer, but it also affects all the other wildlife in our parks and yards. I'm not sure what can be done about the coyotes, but we just can't stand by and do nothing. I'm asking this council to start looking into how we can control these vicious animals. If we don't, in another few years, we're going to find ourselves living in a jungle-like atmosphere. Coyotes rarely attack humans. However, they have been known to. And before we run into some serious trouble, we need to, this has been going on. I'm at a loss. I know nothing about controlling the coyote population, but I think that the village needs to start looking at this as well as controlling the deer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lazarus. Are there any questions from council? If not, I will give Lieutenant Bloom a chance to just comment because I know he has looked into the coyote issue. Lieutenant Bloom?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the coyote problem is a little bit more complicated than the deer issue for us. They're quite a bit more savvy. They run in small packs, and for us to try to trap them or do any kind of coyote calling, a little bit unpractical for us. Problem with trapping the coyotes, especially in an area like Amberley Green or a park-like setting, is that dogs could get trapped in the trap and things like that. Other animals that are not wild animals, excuse me, could get into that trap. We have managed to call some coyotes when we have the safe opportunity to do so. We've called 3 coyotes in the last month. which has really not put much of a dent into the amount of coyotes that we have in the village. Although most people rarely see them, they are there. With that said, if somebody wanted to hire a service to set traps on their own property, they are certainly entitled to do that. The village is just not going to take that position to put traps on public property where dogs could be in that victim to the trap. There is a correlation between the coyote and the deer. As far as, you know, when you have a lot of deer, the coyotes are prevalent. Our deer numbers are down. The coyote numbers, we don't have an accurate count of. With that said, you know, one of the only communities that pretty much the whole state, Midwest is getting problems with coyotes. Every community has the problem, whether you're in the inner city or a rural area like Amberley Village. So we just trying to do what we can to try to manage those.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant. Are there any questions from council members?
My hand is raised. Yes. Mayor?
Natalie, you have a question?
Yeah. Yeah, I was not aware that we were allowed to set traps to catch animals on our property. I think that whether we are or not, it sounds like a dangerous thing to do. I mean, a lot of people do have invisible fence, but dogs do get out. And I would hate to see a dog caught in someone's coyote trap that you put out because you were afraid your dog would be taken out by a coyote. We also have had deer body parts in our yard that we've found. And I mean, we know that the deer are prey of the coyote, and I apologize, it looks like my internet is not good, but the coyote are doing what they do by killing the deer. And I mean, I think it's just all sort of gonna go around and round. If there's not enough deer, then the coyote will be eating our dogs. And if we start culling the coyote, then we'll never be able to keep up with the deer. So we did, you know, we are on track to cull as many 50 deer this year. So that's our highest ever. I mean, I would hate to see this come for review in the HEW committee because I just don't see an end to it. But thank you, Bruce, for coming and telling us your concerns.
I just want to make the point that at the end, I will keep showing up to deer calling meetings. But as these people keep saying, oh, save the deer, it's only adding to the rest of our problems. That there isn't a silver bullet for any of this, I realize it. But as a long-term resident, I'm very concerned about finding dead animal parts larger than my arm in my yard. So, well, on that note, have happy holidays, everybody, and maybe we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. And Natalie, if you could take your hand down.
I don't have a hand.
Okay, Ray, did you have some?
Yeah, I just had a question for Lieutenant Bloom if he's still there.
And Ray, you should have a hand. Click on your participants and it'll show up on your right-hand side.
Got it. On my right-hand side.
And it shows Ray's hand at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you. Lieutenant Bloom, do you think we have more of a coyote problem ever since we cleared the Gibson greeting card area? Because it seemed like I think there might have been a pack or so there, and then once that whole area was cleared, you know, it's kind of like the coyotes needed to find another place to habitat.
No, I don't had anything to do. It's there and conducive. The creek runs right there along Section Road. The property that Gibson was on is somewhat, not completely overgrown, but it does have a fair amount of brush there now, which is highly conducive for coyotes. So
Yeah.
I don't think that the building being gone, the whole parking lot has changed anything as far as the coyote.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we can now move on to the next item on the agenda. That's
Mayor.
committee reports. Yeah, Scott.
I did want to add a couple of items to this. I've been going to a wildlife conference for probably the last 6 or 7 years. 2 years ago, we had police officers that went as well. And there are items that are on that agenda every year that are relevant to most communities. One being deer and the other being coyotes. And from what I have learned and what I've studied on coyotes is that they are everywhere, as Lieutenant Bloom alluded to earlier. They're in a lot of communities, especially like Amberley, and you typically do not see them for the most part. And when you do see them, you become alarmed. But they are living among us. And so there are numerous studies that have been able to track the coyotes, to identify what their patterns are, and some of the things that Bruce referenced, that they typically do not attack people. That is true. But the most important thing that I've learned from the studies and from the conferences is that educating residents about what to do and what not to do. And we have included that in our e-news from time to time about what residents should do in order to not attract coyotes to their property. And probably the biggest issue is folks that will put out food for animals in the winter, whether it be a bird feeder or dog food or feeding the deer and things of that nature, because that is a natural attractant for the coyotes to come in. But we will rerun some of those tips in our future publications just to remind residents how to deal with the coyotes, because they are not going to go away. They have made a comeback, and we have to learn to live with them throughout our community. So we'll be sharing additional information in the upcoming letters. Thanks.
All right, thanks. All right, we'll now move on to the report from the Planning Commission.
I think I'm off mute.
You're off mute.
There we go. This is the fifth reading of ordinance 2020-16, adding chapter 154.84 to title 4 of the Village of Amberley codified ordinances regarding Amberley Green zoning district regulations. In order to effectively consider any type of development on the village-owned Amberley Green property, the zoning must be changed from the current restrictive Residence A zoning, which is single-family 1-acre lots. However, the village does not have any other zoning district that would accomplish what residents and council believe should be permitted on Amberley Green. Village staff and council have been working to create an environment to maintain green space for Amberley Green while enabling development to occur if the village council finds proposed use is acceptable for the 133-acre property proposed for adoption by village council. Creating a special zoning district would allow for mixed uses to preserve green space, create recreational and residential areas while allowing limited opportunity for revenue generating businesses to locate at the site, which would add to the tax base of the village. So that is the fifth reading of ordinance 2020-16.
Okay, and as all council members know, this has been referred to the Public Buildings and Parks Committee for considering some possible amendment to the ordinance, and that meeting is scheduled for next Monday. Are there any questions from any council members? Okay, seeing none, we'll now move on to the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item I have is my stuff. Regarding the renewal of our insurance policy with Zurich for property and casualty insurance. Michael Fischel of Assured Partners represents the village for our property and casualty insurance, and he is compensated an annual fee of $13,000 per year for his services. Mr. Fischel has been representing the village since 2006 and is an astute business person, and he's been able to save us quite a bit of money. So for this year, excuse me, the proposed insurance premium will be $73,551, which is up approximately a little bit over 5% from last year. The reason for this increase is that the claims were approximately 1/2 of the annual premiums. But in light of this situation, we feel that the insurance premium increase is substantially less than what a lot of other insurance companies are doing. Additionally, the proposed premium is still about $1,200 less than what the insurance premium was for 2 years ago. Accordingly, I move that we adopt resolution number 2020-32, a resolution authorizing the village manager to enter into a contract with Zurich for property and casualty insurance.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 2020-32, authorizing a contract with Zurich for property and casualty insurance. Are there any questions? I do not see any hands, so it has been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 2020-32. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Be it noted that the resolution passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item we have is discussing a resolution in support of the uses of corona relief funds implemented by the Amberley Village staff. In June of this year, the governor signed House Bill number 481, which began the distribution of corona aid relief economic security funds, also known as CARES funds, to local communities. Amberley has received more than $248,000 in the Corona Relief Fund and will be reimbursed by Hamilton County for another $81,000 for a total of $329,000. Kathy, our finance administrator, went through a whole lot of detail going to identify how all the money was spent and appropriately. It was quite a tedious and very enlightening situation. So we have purchased some of the items, how the money was spent, were wages and benefits for the service department when they had to serve full-time as firefighters, furniture and equipment which meets the COVID needs, for which the furniture and fixtures can be sanitized, touchless updates such as self-opening doors, faucets, soap dispensers, drinking fountains, and things like that. And we also have a certain amount has been expended to facilitate remote meetings such as this, and cleaning supplies, cleaning equipment, hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes. Lord knows all the stuff which we have to buy. So accordingly, I move that we adopt resolution number 2020-33, a resolution in support of the uses of coronavirus relief funds implemented by the Amberley Village staff.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 2020-33, which is a resolution in support of the village's use of the CARES Act relief funds. Just a couple comments from my perspective. You know, this CARES Act has been around now for like 6 or 7 months, and the guidance that came out very early on was, and even to this day, has been not the most exact guidance, but the village finance administrator, our village manager, have all done a great job working with everyone with knowledge of this to really gain an understanding of what qualifies and so forth. And I think they've done, a job that, I couldn't even have envisioned 6 months ago to maximize our benefit from a village standpoint by being proactive, but at the same time, always being very conscious that they had to adhere to the law. And I thank Councilman Hattenback and the Finance Committee for their review of that. I think that puts us in a much better place as these expenses are audited. I think this was a great job by, as I said, by everyone in the village staff to take advantage of these funds. Councilwoman Conway, you have a question.
You said what I was going to add regarding our review and then the council's endorsement via this resolution lends support for future evaluation or auditing for how the expenses were allocated, how the money was allocated.
Are there any other questions? If not, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 2020-33. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And be it noted that the resolution passed unanimously. And Councilwoman Conway, could you take your hand down?
Okay, the next item on my agenda is to amend appropriations. Every year in December, all revenue and expenditures for the current year are reviewed to ensure that the village has not exceeded the allowable appropriations in any fund. Appropriations may not be more than the total estimated resources. Total estimated resources consist of the remaining balance in each fund at the end of the current year, plus anticipated revenue for the following year. Since this is calculated before the end of the year, it is often necessary to reduce appropriations if the total estimated resources do not meet expectations. If revenue exceeds the amount anticipated, the village may choose to increase appropriations in order to make use of additional funds. Several funds need to be adjusted this year. Because health insurance rates change during the year, it's difficult to determine what is needed. The employee health fund needs to be increased by $2,641. Revenue in the mayor's court custodial fund was less than anticipated. It must be reduced by $14,321. The police fund exceeded anticipated revenue by $47,000. In order to make use of this money, an additional $47,000 must be appropriated in this fund. The Kenwood Southwest Jeds custodial fund missed expectations by $77,000. Therefore, the fund 9904 must be reduced by $77,000. The Kenwood Escrow custodial fund must be increased by appropriations for $2,400 to cover anticipated refund requests. Additionally, because the village is anticipating large street programs over the next several years, the Finance Committee recommended that an additional $100,000 be transferred to the 2011 street fund in 2020. In most years, the village transfers $200,000 a year to the street fund to subsidize the cost of the street program. That amount was reduced for 2020 because of the additional money that was needed in capital projects funds. Since the unencumbered general fund balance is higher than anticipated, it was determined that this will be beneficial to transfer this extra amount. There is also a small amount left in the PSEP 911 fund of $438. So that's pretty much everything in this amended appropriations. Accordingly, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-20, ordinance amending appropriations for the fiscal year 2020. That's enough 20s.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2020-20, amending appropriations for the current fiscal year. Are there any questions? And Peg, you noticed I didn't use 20 again. Okay, if not, I don't see any hands, so it has been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2020-20. Please call the roll.
Tom Muthing,
Yes.
Rich Bardak,
Yes.
Peg Conway,
Yes.
Ed Hattenbach,
Yes.
Alita Kamine,
Yes.
Ray Warren,
Yes.
Natalie Wolf.
Natalie, are you there?
She's there. She's just muted.
Yes, did you not hear me?
Mm-mm.
Did you not hear me?
We did not. I got it on, I have it on I've recorded it.
Oh.
Okay, can move on to the next item.
Okay. Next item and the final item on the agenda, which is the annual appropriations ordinance for the year 2021. So the purpose is to fund the village operations and appropriate monies for the calendar year. Some items which we want to look at is our village manager, Mr. Larmer, had referred to earlier, that the 2020 earnings tax revenue will fall short of our $3 million estimate. Expectations are that the earnings tax collections will be about $2,915,000. The estimated of revenues and expenses made in 2019 projected a general fund gain of $1,752. However, the village is likely to end the year with at least $350,000. Two factors drove this outcome. One was reduction of planned expenditures in April of 2020 due to the COVID-19, and the infusion of $329,000 of CARES funding from the state and county that offset these expenses. In April, staff identified the most likely consequence of the pandemic as an earnings tax loss of approximately $500,000. At the end of November, our earnings tax collection for 2020 trailed 2019 by only $500. Staff also believes the general fund revenues could see a decrease between $552,000 and $978,000 from our estimated revenues of $5.6 million. In reality, the village will likely see increased revenues totaling $5,750,000. Areas where the village realized increased revenue include $130,000 in a signing bonus of extending our cell tower lease, a sale of land to Lewis Animal Hospital for a net gain of $187,000. One area where our revenue exceeded our estimate was property tax, where the village received an additional $40,000 over what was estimated by the county auditor. The other area of increased revenues, although booked as miscellaneous non-operating, is $86,600, which was received from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. As a side note, I saw today that the Bureau of Workers' Compensation is distributing an additional quote unquote dividend to all the public and private entities this month. The specific dollar amount is unknown at this time. So basically, the total budget, and this was last page of the packet, which or the general 2021 budget summary, is expecting our total revenue for the 2021 year to be $5.4 million, expenditures to be approximately $5,755,000. So a shortfall, a deficit of roughly $355,000, which basically offsets what the surplus is for this particular year. Some of the revenue assumptions were $3 million for earnings tax, $1,039,000 for property taxes. Rollback, the homestead rollback, $158,000. JEDs, $110,000. Waste collection, $241,000, just to name a few. Some of the expenditures of $5,755,000 will be 23 full-time positions for police department, which includes a training supervisor, approximately $70,000 worth of overtime, $61,000 for part-time dispatch, 2 additional police vehicles totaling $101,000. The fire budget will actually be a decrease over as compared to 2020. And most of the other departments are pretty much staying the same. The biggest change is the police department budget will be up about 9% over last year or 2020, but the overall budget will be increasing by about 2.5%. Accordingly, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-21, an ordinance making appropriations for the expenses for the village of Amberley for the fiscal year of 2021, totaling $5,754,979.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2020-21, which makes the appropriations for our fiscal year 2021. Are there any questions or comments? The one comment I would make that was, I made this in the finance committee, at first when I saw a deficit of 350,000, you'd be kind of alarmed. But we do, because we have to budget and appropriate kind of at that line item level, there is an element of not over budgeting, but you don't want to have to constantly be revising your budget. I mean, so historically over the last 6 or 7 years, we have underspent our budget by anywhere from 150 to 250,000. So I think a more likely final outcome for us next year is a smaller deficit. We will have a deficit, but I think it reflects, the need to support the streets fund and things like that. So it's something I think is reasonable, especially given the surplus that we have in 2020.
Let me add this much. I think the Amberley administration and all the staff did an absolute bang-up job in really cutting costs and doing whatever was necessary to help us achieve this particular surplus for 2020. And their efforts are greatly appreciated.
Okay. There's no further questions or comments. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2020-21, making our appropriations for fiscal year 2021. Please call the roll.
Tom Muthing,
Yes.
Rich Bardak,
Yes.
Peg Conway,
Yes.
Ed Hattenbach,
Yes.
Alita Kamine,
Yes.
Ray Warren,
Yes.
Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
And that concludes my report. Thank you.
We'll now move on to the Streets, Public Utilities, and Sewers Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Streets, Public Utilities, and Sewer Committee met a few days ago on December 7th. I'm just going to go through a couple of items that we covered at that meeting. One is basically embedded in several of the sheets that Ed gave to us regarding budget items, capital expense items for the coming year. And so at our meeting, we reviewed What we anticipate will be major capital expenditures associated with our committee, and mostly associated with maintenance. And this includes assault. Now, to be very clear, when I go through these items, I'm not asking for approval for any of these items at this point, because things might change between now and when the a proposal will go before us. Secondly, many of these items will require a bid, and so we don't have any of that as well. So among the major items we anticipate spending next year is a salt conveyor that's used to control our salt at the north site. And we anticipate this is going to be a joint purchase between Amberley Village and several other communities. We currently have a salt loader that's in very poor condition that requires regular and costly repair. We also anticipate purchase of a brine maker. As you know, we use brine for street treatments. This item was originally in our 2020 budget, but it was deferred, as Ed highlighted, due to COVID budget concerns. Another item is a Bobcat. It's to replace our 2002 vehicle, which is in poor repair and no longer fully functional. Associated with the streets program will be purchase of 12 fire hydrants. And the last major expenditure is to replace an air conditioner rooftop unit that replaces one of the units that's over 20 years old. And we don't expect any staffing changes in the maintenance department. So that's basically one item associated with the kinds of capital expenditures and associated with the streets program. The next item, which we've discussed at the last couple of council meetings between the Streets Committee and the Finance Committee, is the 8-year street improvement program. Something that we brought up, as I said, I believe at the September-October council meeting, and followed with the Finance Committee. And so this was a study, a pavement condition study that was conducted by CT Consultants that really brought up to date the condition of our streets. And basically streets were rated using standard engineering metrics from poor to fair to good to excellent, and the approximate cost to maintain our streets, and in some cases for complete overhaul and replacement. CT also reviewed how our street maintenance program has fared over the last 10 years. And to be clear, and actually the good news is our streets program has maintained our streets. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of improvement overall and a whole lot of falling back. So we've basically been maintaining our streets overall. Obviously, we have overhauled some streets during this last 10-year period, but then some streets have also fallen behind. So that's good news. Now, and the other piece about maintenance is if we maintain our streets, there's no reason why a street can't last up to 50 years without a major overhaul. And so it's fortunate that we have made this investment, so we haven't had to have major overhauls over the last 10 years. However, for the next 8 years, we anticipate we're going to have to invest about $6 million in our streets. Now, a good part of this expenditure is to overhaul our most expensive streets that are also in poor to fair condition. And so over this period, the streets that we're talking about include the Farmcrest region that we've brought up over the last several years, probably the worst region in the village. Next is the Amberley Village Service Drive, which serves the North Side business area, the Elbrook region, the Roman Estate region, and the Farm Acres region. Now, when you go through the pavement condition study, with the exception of the Farm Acres region, all the other regions I identified are in actually pretty poor condition based on the rating system. Now, Farm Acres Drive, now I'm going to explain this. Farm Acres Drive is not rated as poor. That is, if you look at the pavement study, it's not considered poor. However, we know based on other factors, such as the deterioration of the underlying concrete base, we know eventually we're going to need to have an eventual replacement at Farm Acres Drive. And so this is scheduled far out in this 8-year program, actually in the last year. And so hopefully Farm Acres Drive will, if there is deterioration, it will not be observed. It'll be underneath the pavement surface as opposed to the Farm Crest region. Now, in addition to into this major street program, there will also be regular annual maintenance of the streets as we do each year. So for example, for crack sealing, microsurfacing, rut filling, pavement rejuvenation, things like that, there will be a bolus of funds available for an annual maintenance program to maintain our streets in good to excellent condition. I guess the last part here is Mr. Larmer has also been in touch with Cincinnati Water and MSD to determine their plans for water line replacement and to coordinate any anticipated work with our streets program. Obviously, the last thing we want to do is invest in a substantial street repair only to have Cincinnati Water come in or MSD to come in later and tear the street up. So it's really important that as we pursue this 8-year program, things are coordinated as best as possible. The last thing I wanted to bring up from our committee meeting is that resident, Mr. Roth, came to our meeting and asked the village to consider ways to increase pedestrian connectivity and safety as we engage in major street upgrades. And so this might include bike lanes, walking paths, in fact, indeed roundabouts. Mr. Larmer is going to follow up with CT consultants to see what's possible and get back to the committee. And so let's see, the next part of the street program is how are we going to fund it? At our first Streets Committee meeting, we brought up possible ways, and some of this was followed up with the Finance Committee. And so how do we plan to fund, this $6+ million project over 8 years? And so there are 6 points that we're going to follow. One is effectively use our street fund balances, make judicious choices, utilize our stormwater fund balance where applicable, continue transfers from the general fund into the street funds. We anticipate adopting an additional $5 license plate fee. And we will also continue to use grants and loans where possible. And so, for example, as you know, for the Farm Crest area, we are going to be using grants and loans to partially fund that whole operation. And lastly, utilize the village's unencumbered general fund balance to cover shortfalls during the 8-year program. So with this comprehensive approach, the village plans to invest over $6 million over the 8-year period to make significant advances in our street conditions. So before you is Resolution 2020-34, resolution adopting street improvement plan. And so the committee asks the council to approve Resolution 2020-34.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2020-34, which is a resolution adopting the current street improvement plan. I will first recognize Councilwoman Kamine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to start by saying thank you so much to the village manager and to our engineers and all of the people who really, I said to Scott today, the federal government has been spending, 20 years they've been talking about infrastructure improvements, and every year they say it's the next big thing. And really from the time of that first meeting in the streets committee to the CT consultants showing us the street condition to getting this here to council has been just incredible. And I think it's ambitious, but it's also just really, really creative and well done. And I do fully support this. I do want to just kind of reiterate a couple things that Councilmember Warren mentioned and have a question and a plea. I do think that things can change in 8 years, and hopefully, on the positive side of that, hopefully there's more opportunity, more income, more revenue, more opportunities to put more money into the general fund balance. And so that will potentially free up money for other projects that may be taking a back seat in this space over the next 8 years as we focus on this critical project that I think is, overwhelmingly going to be supported by our residents, and especially using the condition of these streets. Some of them are, just, you can tell they need this. Maybe there will be opportunity for additional grants, and there will be infrastructure investment from the state and federal governments. I mean, it's very possible. I'm trying to be optimistic about that. But I also, I do hope that if we still have, as Ray mentioned, there's this additional money for a streets program, and we'll continue to work streets. Like, I've made my plea for Lamarck, and there are other streets, but also some of those things that we've talked about, like the connectivity into the green, if the green gets developed, and some of the ability to have those projects. But most importantly, I know that many years ago, HEW passed a sort of or this council passed a resolution that originated in HEW related to, pedestrian improvements and sort of that kind of thinking. And I know that that's not the function of this program, but it sounds like the streets committee may be continuing to sort of think about ways that at the very least, when many of these streets in particular that are in this program, Sagamore, Elbrook, North Farm Crest, some of these areas are particularly plagued, not even so much with the pedestrian issue, although that too, but major speed control issues. And so just encouraging the program, I think, to the extent it is already done, or maybe even with an extra little level of extra zing, to really be thinking about how, if we're going to be doing these investments, we don't want to do these streets and then tear them up with our temporary speed bumps, a minute later. So speed control issues, pedestrian safety, restriping, things that aren't necessarily going to add a huge extra amount of money to any of these projects, but just making sure that while we're in there, while we're doing this, while we're, working with these neighborhoods, that we're really paying attention to this sort of holistic approach. And Manager, I think my question to you is, is this already baked in, or is there something that council should do, or that, to Ray's point, the streets committee should do to encourage, like, just thinking about that? I'm not talking about ripping streets up and doing roundabouts, but, when you're talking when you get those calls on many of these streets are major offenders for speed control issues as well, for example. So can I just ask that question to the manager really quickly?
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, so in regards to our current process and what we envision for this 8-year street improvement plan, is that anytime that we consider a street improvement plan, we always look at, besides the obvious in terms of the pavement condition and stormwater and things of that nature, but we always look to see what kind of pedestrian safety improvements can be made. And then we also look at it from a speeding standpoint. If this is a street that has had speeding issues, is there something that we can do in terms of the paving piece of that? So this process involves the police department, involves administration, involves maintenance. So it's not done in an isolated situation. So we all have hands on that. But I think the other piece that is helpful is that our village engineer, CT Consultants, also knows what we're looking for. Frank Tweehuse, our engineer, is very perceptive as to what Amberley expects when we do a street program, and he is always looking out for what else we can do. So I think he has that, he brings that to us, and it's part of the culture whenever we do this. So in fact, when we talked about FarmCrest, we know we will be doing FarmCrest, and he's already been instructed to take a look at FarmCrest because we just took up the temporary speed humps off of FarmCrest. So we're going to want to address that issue somehow. That may be narrowing the street, or it might be doing something else, but they're already on that, or they will be on it when they do the design. And obviously it's much more efficient and easier to do when you're reconstructing a street. So streets like FarmCrest, we can get that incorporated in, and it will be easier to do it as part of part of the design. But for the other streets, we know we have an issue on Sagamore. So that'll be another street where we'll have to take a look to see if there's something that we need to do there. That's not a reconstruction, but it's a repaving. But what can we do in order to make that a better situation? I mean, we don't like getting the calls, and I know council members do not enjoy getting the calls about speeding on your street. So it's incumbent on us to assist in that process. And then the final layer of that is the Streets Committee. So the Streets Committee, when we take that street program to them each year, they have eyes on it as well, because this has been drilled into their mantra as well, is to look at it, see what kind of pedestrian improvements could be made. So that is really what the drill is, and that's what I expect to unfold over the next 8 years as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Wolf.
Thank you. And thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ray, and the Streets Committee. I mean, I think that having a plan to improve our streets is the only way to get these things done. I'm glad Alita asked about the pedestrian safety ordinance, because I actually called it up. I have it up on my screen. Or resolution, I'm sorry. And the reason I'm sorry that it's a resolution and not an ordinance is because I feel that a resolution expresses the wishes and the culture of those who are in power at a particular time and place. And that culture, as Scott has reiterated, it hasn't changed. I'm happy to hear, because I'm no longer on the Streets Committee, but a resolution is only as strong as those on council and in the administration who still support it. And it was 2016 that we passed the resolution declaring support for traffic safety and pedestrian safety. And Section 5 is where it indicates that whenever street and road improvements are planned, attention will be given to accommodate pedestrian and bicycle safety needs. And in keeping with current practice, any unused road and street repair funds will be allocated as needed to implement pedestrian safety. So of course, you say any unused road and street repair funds, we probably won't have anything left. We can hardly even get the money to do these repairs. So it's really important, I think, to think about the pedestrian aspect at the same time that we're making the 8-year plan. And I don't know if that could be done by somehow incorporating this resolution, or just, indicating that we still support this resolution, or re-upping the resolution. But it should be more than just a wish. We really should put more of ourselves into committing to repair. If we're committing to repair the roads, then the road and the pedestrian issues are one and the same. Thanks.
Okay. Councilman Hattenback.
One question that I have, I've looked at these projections, and the source of use statement, which was very helpful in trying to determine how everything's going to work out over the 8-year period. But the one question that I have is, what are the inflation assumptions involved in the streets project? Because I just have a feeling with over an 8-year period of time, we've got to give something to fall back on, because I just don't think it's going to just be as overall a $600,000 shortfall or whatever it's projected to be. So whether the CT engineers can make some assumptions and to update us, or what, that's what we'd like to know.
In terms of the inflation, there was no rate of inflation that was built into these numbers. what my expectation from CT was to give me realistic numbers of what this program was going to cost, because take us back 2 months ago, I think all of us were a little skeptical as to how we could get this done. So, but I wanted realistic numbers. So I feel like the numbers are realistic, and I want to talk about those a little bit. Even though there's no rate of inflation built into it, there is a contingency built into it, and that is a 10% contingency. So that gives me a little bit of a relief on that. But I think the other part of it is that these numbers are based on 2021 estimated cost. So I don't have any concerns about the 2021 or the 22-23 program, because I feel like those are pretty much going to be on target with what CT has estimated. Keep in mind that this is not a detailed design yet. So once we get into design, things may change. We may find some things that surprise us. But I think going forward, my expectation is that each year we'll take a look at this, make sure that we are on track, and that the next years that are ahead of us, we're going to want to stay with those types of streets. Because part of this is looking at the condition of the streets. Even though we've identified this next 8-year plan, we have left areas where there are streets that are not named. So certain streets in the village we know are going to need paved in 4 or 5 years. So those streets are the ones we're going to want to make sure we keep an eye on. And by the same token, the streets that are in the plan, we want to make sure that the progression of those it makes sense. I mean, I think one thing we would not want to do is to get into a situation where we're repaving certain streets and they're not in the condition we expected them to be. So the expectation from a staff standpoint is we will be revisiting this, and the street committee will certainly be, we'll hear about that. I would just add that if we did look at an inflation number, and let's say that you chose 3%, so on the $6.7 million, we're looking about $200,000 worth of inflation cost. The other part of this is that this is a plan, so this is not binding on council, but the expectation is that we're all buying into this, that this is moving forward, and that this is your priority for the village. So if we do come up short on repaving streets, then the expectation is we need to make good on this, because we are going to be communicating this to our residents. And next month, you're going to be asked to adopt an additional $5 license plate fee. So we are going to be held accountable for what we're putting forth here. So that would be my response in regards to the inflation. I can certainly talk to CT to see if they would suggest my multiplier, whether it's going with a CPI or something. But I think they will probably do that as we move forward and go along. But I'll certainly have the discussions with CT about that.
Councilwoman Conway?
Yes, I just wanted to add a comment kind of from the prior to the street committee. The finance committee was presented with this plan, and the original financing options included raising taxes, borrowing money, or levying an assessment on residents in critical areas. And by way of commending our staff for their creativity and initiative, the finance committee said no way to all of that, or not no way, but not preferred, and asked them to kind of go back to the drawing board financially speaking. And what we were, I think we can say, very impressed with what they brought back, which is this plan tonight. So kudos again to our staff for their work.
Councilwoman Kamine?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I'll just go very briefly. I had a thought about, I think, Scott, you might have been alluding to this, and I may have come up in streets, but I think you're going to be communicating this to residents as I don't want to use the word sort of branded program, but is that the intention, that it's going to kind of be it's not just another street plan. It's not just another street meeting. So it may be worth even kind of putting on the agenda, instead of just kind of announcing that there'll be a streets meeting every year, kind of talking about this every year, so that especially residents in those areas especially the ones where we know there's a lot of complaint, going back to my earlier point, where there are a lot of complaints, a lot of high traffic incidents, that they know that that's an opportunity for them to come and share, or, you know, for us to do a little bit of kind of information gathering. Because I think, to Natalie's point also, I feel like it's being done internally, but it's not, I don't know how outward facing it is. And so I think for residents, it feels like it's very complaint driven. And then I think this branding is going to be very helpful for them to understand that this is all part of us responding to all of these issues, frankly, that I'm sure you get 1,000 million calls about the condition of our streets and all of these issues, and streets committee. So I think this is a great opportunity to just communicate, and maybe on an annual basis, when it comes to those neighborhoods, those a little bit extra communication with those streets that under this brand that they're coming. Just a thought about that.
Yeah, point well taken. And certainly we do listen to our residents, so that will be incorporated in here. But branding will be coming once we get a little more firm here. Yes.
Councilman Warren?
Yeah, Lee, that was a great idea in terms of branding. You know, I think the analogy to this street proposal is what we did several years ago with capital expenses, where we started planning out, okay, how are we going to replace our cruisers, our police cruisers? How are we going to replace our major capital items in the village? Okay, rather than deal with crisis, okay, let's deal with this methodically and create a plan over an extended period of time. So this way it gets built into the budget, and frankly, it's been very successful, right? And so I view this as almost a new leaf of that, okay, where we're going to look at major expenses for street improvement over an extended period of time in a very methodical, deliberate way that will result in, in improvement in the village. And just one other comment: we have maintained the streets in the village. And so when we deal with infrastructure, Alita, we have dealt with infrastructure. Unfortunately, some of these items that we are going to deal with moving forward are major items, okay? But we have dealt with infrastructure so they don't become major items, right? Okay.
Okay, I still see a couple hands still up, okay? Natalie, do you have another question? I guess
No, but I can't find my name to take my, there we go.
Okay. And, my only comment is, and kind of tying into what Scott was talking about, using, I view this plan as a living plan. It is something that we have to look at least once a year, if not more often, and the streets committee will be looking at that. So it is not a plan that you stick on a shelf and say, oh, we're done. It is a living plan that we will look at on an ongoing basis and track ourselves against to determine whether we're on track. So with those as all the comments and questions, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 2020-34, adopting the street improvement plan. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Be it noted that resolution passes unanimously.
And that concludes the Streets Committee report.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the Public Outreach Committee.
Oh, just to keep it short, the Public Outreach Committee met, and we are we're getting finalized the public discourse documents, and more to come on that. Thanks.
All right. We'll now move on to the Police and Fire Committee.
Okay, thank you. The committee met on December 8th, reviewed some budget items, as you've also previously heard. Most notably, there is a need to purchase an additional cruiser this year in preparing for the budget process, it was determined that 3 cruisers are over 100,000 miles, and that's the threshold after which repair expenses start to increase. And so as the budget had some additional infusion of money from CARES Act and sales of assets, et cetera, this year, it seemed like a good idea to look at getting one before the end of this year, to have a second one. Would be the second purchase for this year, and then there are 2 in next year's budget as well. So staff was able to get through the state bid process a Ford Utility Interceptor that it will cost $33,007 with $10,000 in changeover fees. The committee was supportive of this. So therefore, I move that we adopt Resolution 2020-35, authorizing the purchase of a police cruiser.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2020-35, authorizing the purchase of a additional police cruiser. Are there any questions or comments? I do not see any hands, so it has been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2020-35. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Being noted that that resolution passes unanimously.
Okay, that concludes the police fire report. Shall I go on to public buildings and parks?
Yeah, the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee was on the agenda, but that's been deferred till next month when we'll pick that up. So yes, please go on to the Public Buildings and Parks Committee.
All right. The Public Buildings and Parks Committee met on November 24th to continue our deliberations around the question of controlling dogs and dogs at Amberley Green. We had quite a few residents and actually someone from outside of Amberley who patronizes the Amberley Green with her dog in attendance. We had a very productive discussion, heard a lot of different viewpoints. There was I thought, very respectful listening of all different points of view. We have honed in on the designated hours for dogs off leash and on leash. We had significant input around the need for better, more clarifying signage on the property. And we also really delved into the purpose, like what is Amberley Green for and what does it need to be presented to the public as? And that was part of the signage discussion. So as previously noted, we are meeting again next Monday, which is December 21st. In addition to the zoning related topic, we will be discussing the dogs under control again, or the potential ordinance for the Amberley Green dog presence. And so we look forward to continuing hearing from the community on that. We're fine tuning the approach. It's not set in stone by any means. So that concludes my report.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will now move on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had 3 items I wanted to highlight from the manager's report. The first being the 2018-2019 audit was included in your packet. I think it reflects well on Amberley Village and on your financial management. So I know the mayor had made comment about this at the previous meeting. The Finance Committee did have a chance to review it and reflected on it as well. So just wanted to bring that to the attention, and as well, if any residents are interested in seeing it, it is part of the council packet. The second item I wanted to mention is in regards to the COVID update. We continue to monitor the spread of COVID within the community and communicate information to the residents. We did an e-blast on November 17th that focused solely on this topic. And then we saw the December e-news as another opportunity to remind residents that, with winter holidays, including Hanukkah and Christmas, be specifically concerned about that and just trying to bring more attention to it to our residents. And we will continue to provide additional information to residents to have them help us out, because they are the ones that can make the difference here, especially within our own community. And the third item I wanted to mention is just bring your attention to, I don't need a response tonight, but I would like for you to look at the dates that were proposed for the 2021 council meetings. It does not appear as though there are any conflicts, but you may know of some that I'm not aware of. So those are listed in your manager's report. So if you do know of conflicts, if you could let me know so that we could at least get that calendar set for 2021 when we come back here in January. And that concludes my report, Mayor.
Are there any questions for the manager? I do not see any. So, Chief, do you have anything?
I just got a couple of things I wanted to hit on. Just talking about police department updates. When the training position was mentioned, I just want to point out that this is a position that we created internally after myself, Lieutenant Bloom, and some of the staff talked. With all the new mandates that will be coming out and the monitoring from, we'll be monitoring local, state, and federal changes in law enforcement over the next few years. We'll have a training lieutenant that actually just handles all that, as well as continues to do hands-on training with the officers on a regular basis. The position will rotate amongst all 4 different shifts to make sure everybody gets the adequate hands-on training to go with everything else that we have going on. With that, by moving someone to the training position, we moved a current supervisor, Brandon Gehring will go into that training spot. We went through a promotional process, and Brian Baker came to us a number of years ago from Norwood. He's going to be promoted to the rank of sergeant after the first of the year. Last thing, as for the CARES money actually was real beneficial to us on the fire side this year. You've seen the reduction in the fire budget. And part of that was because we were able to purchase items that were needed at the end of this year and for beginning of next year out of the CARES money. That gave us an opportunity to reduce the budget on the fire side for next year. And that is it.
Okay, I see Councilwoman Conway has a question.
I just wanted to add, the chief was a little bit modest in talking about the promotion process for the new position. He described at our meeting in some detail how they did an internal promotion rather than bringing in an external firm to conduct it. And they had interviews and they had a simulation with a resident posing as someone filing a complaint to kind of see how they reacted. And it was very thorough and innovative. And I just wanted that to be part of people's knowledge.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Now move on to the mayor's report. Just a couple things. Another item that was in the village manager's report that I just wanted to mention. It'll be coming out in January, but Rumpke has indicated that they will start accepting additional items into our recycling, and it's going to include the plastic containers for yogurt and butter and so forth. And they will be coming out with hopefully very good guidance, because when you get into that plastic arena, it's an area that is subject to a lot of questions and mistakes. So I know I've talked to the village manager about that, and hopefully they'll come out with some pictures to help us all out to understand what is recyclable and not recyclable. The next item, we are in the midst of Hanukkah right now, and other holidays coming up. So I do want to wish all of our residents happy holidays. But, it is obviously a very unusual year. So I think the most important thing for everyone as we look forward to these holidays is to please stay safe and follow the guidance, not only local guidance, but listen carefully to the guidance that we do get from our medical professionals and so forth. We are starting to hear that, maybe that come the middle of next year, things will be better, but we need to keep up our vigilance so that we maximize or minimize the impact on people. So please, really try to stay safe as we move forward. And then the last comment, I really want to thank the staff at Amberley Village for their efforts during an incredibly trying year that we're about to finish. The staff has just done an outstanding job on everything that they have faced, and done that with their normal thoroughness, diligence, and overall, they've kept up the excellent service to our residents, and I just can't thank everyone on our village staff enough. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions or comments? Councilwoman Conway, your hand's still up. Okay, any other questions or comments? Is there any new business? If not, we are going to be adjourning into executive session. This is part of our normal annual process to complete the appraisal and review of our village manager. So I would hereby make a motion that we adjourn into executive session to allow us to conduct the annual review of our village manager, including pay and performance and job. So that's my motion.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn into executive session. Please call the roll.
Thank you for your patience. Tom Uthing,
Yes.
Rich Bardak, Peg Conway,
Yes.
Ed Hattenback,
Yes.
Alita Kamine,
Yes.
Ray Warren,
Yes.
Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, and as I explained, when we go into these executive sessions, we are going to be going into executive session, then we'll come back out into general session. We will not be doing anything further in general session. So for those residents who are online watching this evening, for the next whatever period we're in executive session, you will not be seeing anything. And when we come back, you probably don't want to hang on to see us simply adjourn the meeting. And this is the normal process. We will report out in general session the results of the review at our January meeting. Again, for any residents watching this evening, happy holidays. And for the council members, for everyone other than, for council members, they will be joining the executive session. For Scott, if you can hang around, but everyone else, including Andy, I don't believe you will need to hang around. So we are adjourning in this executive session at 7:53.
Yeah, we're here. Magic.
I think everyone is here. Everyone is here, right?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, Scott,
Yes, sir.
I will, we're going to try to summarize this real quick because,
Are we
first-
broadcasting or are we?
no, we're not.
Now we
Are
are.
we?
It does
We
recording.
have to vote. We have to vote. We're out of executive session.
Okay, I'm hereby making motion to adjourn to general session.
Second.
Okay, and I'm going to call the roll on that vote. Tom Muthing, yes. Ed
Yes.
Hattenback,
Yes.
Ted Conway, Ray Warren,
Yes.
Rich Bardak,
Yes.
Alita Kamine, and Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, so we're back in general session at 8:54. Scott, I am going to take the action to put together the summary or your appraisal. Everyone believes you have had an outstanding year. In not only just because of COVID, you responded to all of the issues and didn't drop any balls. I mean, we will have a lot more to say next month as we go through it, but everyone, and I'm sure you are, and is worn down by this day. So, rather than, and I will talk to you on the phone tomorrow and fill you in others.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Is everyone
Yes.
okay with that?
Good.
Okay, if there's no other business, I would like to adjourn the meeting. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Thanks, Tom.
everyone.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy
everybody.
holidays. Merry
Stay well,
Christmas.
stay healthy,
holidays.
everyone.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks. Thank you. You take care.